Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is going deeper. And it's an interesting phenomenon that we often see. We often see our prominent issues, the things that we want to address, that we think are the foundational issues. We often see these issues as foundational when in fact they're really kind of a symptom or an outgrowth of a deeper issue. And we get to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that journey of going deeper is, it's a hero's journey. It really takes a lot of courage and strength and determination to go on that journey, and there can be a lot of pain involved in going through that dark passage to get to the other side. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, let's take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light flooding out from your heart into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub our fingers against our palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation, the tickling, the tingling, and allow that sensation to bring you present to your body and this magnificent physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so good to be with you. And today's topic really came out of work that I've been doing with my clients, and to be seeing the transformation of focus that occurs in this process of healing. We in the process of healing, we can't bypass it. We kind of have to go through it. And we might have an issue on the surface that looks like it's the issue. Good morning, Rosalind. Thanks for chiming in. So good to have you here with us. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us too. We're talking about going deeper. And it's really interesting. We might have a trauma on the surface that, or a pattern of trauma on the surface that we want to work with and address. And we consider that that's the thing we want to clean up. That's where the problem is. And then in the process of moving into that experience and that healing process, what I have often witnessed is that we get to deeper and deeper traumas, and often earlier and earlier traumas. So it's interesting because there are so many situations where we know we have certain foundational issues. We spend lots and lots of time in our lives and lots of energy working to address those issues, to clear those issues, to resolve those issues, and they keep arising. And it's interesting. It's interesting to see that pattern. I know for years and years and years, it seemed like forever in my own life. I was working on issues around family for years and years, and it was like the same thing. And it just, no matter what I did, it kept recurring. And one of the things that I want to address around that is that when those things keep recurring, it looks like it's the same thing, but I do very much believe that when we revisit these seemingly persistent patterns, what's happening is we're evolving, and as we're evolving, we revisit these things from a different level, from a different perspective, maybe even from a different dimension. And so even though it seems that it's the same thing, in fact, it isn't. It isn't really the same, because we're not the same. And so the fact that we're not the same makes it so that we're able to experience this thing or resolve this thing or address this thing from another place of being. And that's one aspect. The other aspect is the peeling the onion, and this spiral sort of progression is also maybe a way of peeling the onion. However, I think we often think it's that the issue is this, when in fact it's that, and that part is the thing that has resulted in this. So much for being articulate, right? That the underlying cause is something that we don't necessarily recognize. We figure, well, I've dealt with that, but now I have this issue over here, when in fact the current issue is a direct outgrowth of whatever that original trauma was. And recognizing long-held patterns that connect the two things. Good. Good morning, Dennis. You're multilingual. How awesome is that? Thank you and welcome. It's great to have you here joining us this morning. So we're talking about going deeper, and I just want to acknowledge all of you, all of us, who have chosen to follow the threads, to keep going, to be willing to go deeper, to have the courage to go deeper, and to face what needs to be faced. And the unfortunate thing is that in some capacity, typically, the pain gets to be revisited. It's just the pain of betrayal, the pain of loss. It gets to be revisited, and unless we've experienced it fully the first time through, we end up holding it in our bodies, in our being. And so, for instance, if we have grief and we haven't enabled ourselves to truly, deeply process that grief, as painful as it is, when it feels like our hearts are breaking and we're not going to be able to make it through. If we don't process that when it happens, it becomes something that anchors itself in our bodies and being. And then when it shows up in all kinds of funky ways. So it can show up with reactivity. It can show up with depression. It can show up as anxiety or anger. You know, it can show up in all kinds of ways until we address those foundational things. We spend so much time and effort around avoidance, so much energy in avoidance because we're afraid that maybe we'll be swallowed by the intensity of that emotion, and that we want to dismiss rather than process through something. And it's ironic because the processing through that thing doesn't necessarily have to be a long-term process. You know, when we are present to something and we allow ourselves to experience the experience, then we give ourselves the freedom to move on to the next thing. And, you know, it's interesting. So I have a client who one of the issues that we were working on was weight. And interestingly, there is a huge experience of trauma throughout this person's life. And now, finally, we are getting down to actually addressing that core trauma. And I really believe that so many of us who have had issues with weight, particularly an abundance of weight, have that as a almost as a defense against all the intensity of the emotion of trauma that we haven't necessarily addressed. And it's a way that we can protect ourselves, that we can literally insulate ourselves, and that we can be bigger than the trauma in a particular way. And that's a hypothesis I have. And then the unfortunate thing with weight is that then so many other things come into play, you know, self-image and identity, and oftentimes self-hatred and lack of self-acceptance, and all of those things are part of the dynamic of the underlying trauma typically too. So it's a process. It's really a process to be digging down deeply to whatever the core issue is, the foundational issue, and then to be clearing that foundational issue. So there's a lot. And the thing is that life supports us in doing that. And oftentimes the way that life supports us in doing that is by bringing those issues and that agony to the surface, by creating triggers in life that force those issues to be dealt with. Good morning, Bernadette. So good to have you joining us. We're talking about going deeper, and how when we have these unresolved issues, they can come back. We can be looking at things from the surface thinking, oh, well, this is the problem, when in fact, what's actually true is that there's this deep underlying issue that has remained unresolved that then shows up with all these other all these other permutations and all these other ways. And you know, it's interesting because it can take time. It can take time. Good morning, Gia. Oh my gosh, you made it. How awesome. I know that you watch, and I know that you've had challenges with getting your comments seen. So I am thrilled to see your comment and your name here this morning. Welcome, and so good to have you here with us. So what we're talking about is that the way things look. Yes. Gia says, I'm so happy to be here and finally you can see me. Yes. Well, I'm happy you're here too. So I think oftentimes things aren't what they appear to be, right? Bernadette says, absolutely. It always keeps coming back until it's dealt with. And the thing is, it's really frustrating, that it keeps coming back because we think we've dealt with it over and over again. I was talking about the spiral and how every time it comes back, we're dealing with it from a different place of beingness, from a different experience, a different place in life. But often what's at the heart of it isn't what we think. Often there's something deeper. And and what I was saying is that, like, with one particular client, well, not just one, but what I see is that there are these persisting issues, and it doesn't, maybe it doesn't have to, but what I'm noticing is that it can take time to get down to these very, very, very tender places. And I think part of the reason is, why there's so many layers to the onion is that we have really worked to insulate and protect ourselves, and to well, that's the best way to say it, to insulate and protect ourselves from these issues. So we layer over all kinds of other things. And as we try sometimes to push these things away, we create other kinds of dynamics built on top of them. And so then we have to wade through that. And the other thing is that it takes a lot of courage and strength to be able to deal with these things. And I think sometimes the reason that it takes time is because we have to build a resilience. We have, maybe we need to give ourselves time to build the strength to deal with these things too. I think that that's maybe an aspect of it, to be building a foundation that is solid enough and strong enough to contend with the disruption and the upset of actually moving through the foundational cause. I mean, I've seen that in my clients where over time, they've built a firmer, stronger, clearer, more integrated sense of self. And that's when they have the capacity to deal with the foundational issues. So Bernadette says, I think it takes time because we fail to look inward. Well, I don't think that's always the case. I think that we can be looking inward and we just don't have the ability yet to see what it is that's there. I think that can be possible too. And then Bernadette says, or have looked inward. Sorry, I jumped the gun there, but dismissed it. It's becoming honest with ourselves. I agree that it is a matter of becoming honest with ourselves. However, I think it's also yeah, I think it's so interesting because it's such a slippery slope, right? We can only be honest with ourselves from where we are, right? And, we can say, I've already dealt with that, or I've dealt with that so many times, I don't even want to go there. Maybe that's what you're saying, becoming honest with ourselves to say, well, yeah, if you really don't want to go there, then there's something you're avoiding, then maybe it's not complete. So, I'm just so inspired and awed by witnessing the incredible courage and resilience that people on the path of self-discovery have. Good morning, Susan. So good to have you here with us. Bernadette says, so true, and it will come back when we are ready. And I think, the so much of this personal evolution and growth is about readiness, is about readying ourselves, fortifying ourselves. And I don't mean, it's great to have you here, Susan. I don't mean barricading ourselves against things. I mean fortifying ourselves by strengthening our core, by strengthening our alignment with ourselves. And that divine timing, Susan says, is it about divine timing? I would imagine that divine timing has something to do with it. And I think it also has to do with our courage and our intention, maybe, like the clarity of our intention to make something happen, or to clear something, to become whole, to, it. I think I started embarking on that journey when I was a teenager, and I can tell you that it wasn't until I was in my 50s. Yeah, probably it wasn't until I was in my 50s that I could say, I feel whole. So Gia says, I think it's a process. And there are a number of layers and resistances that we can't see most of the time. But with consistency, things start to get more transparent. And as the traumatic, I'm sure that's not the word you meant, as the traumatic feelings come up, the same time our understanding of it too comes along. And that's where we start to trust the process. Beautifully said, Gia. I love the way that you outlined that whole thing. There is resistance to overcome, for sure, because, it's scary and uncomfortable. It's tremendously uncomfortable, if not agonizingly painful, to move back through these feelings that had been buried. So Susan says courage. Exactly. It takes tremendous courage. And I have to say, I have so much admiration for the people who are so deeply committed to their healing, because it is not a skip in the park. Yeah. A walk in the park, or it just really is very, very challenging. And I'm so moved and awed by the commitment that so many of you show in your own evolution. It's just really amazing. And the stories that we have, the dramas of our lives, the intensity of our experiences is just mind-blowing. And our ability to come back from that, to, after such tragedy and and challenge to be able to come to a place of wholeness, maybe in part because of all of those challenges too. Gia says, and Byron Katie says that you'll realize when you realize means there's perfect timing for everything. And that goes back to Susan suggesting divine timing. Yes. So, there's this interplay in our being of our will and timing, whatever that is. So, as Susan says, you think it's done, breathing it through. Yeah, so sometimes you think it's done. And maybe for that moment you get some relief, and then maybe you see it reappearing in a different way. As we evolve, we get to interact with those reappearances in a different way from a different place. And that's evolution. I another client who is brilliant, talks about these shifts as phase shifts, kind of like quantum healing. It's not about, we can't solve that, sort of a bastardization of the Einstein quote. We can't solve a problem from the level where it was created. So we get to jump to a whole different phase. And that new phase is characterized by a different way of being on a foundational level, right? A shift of being that enables us to not react, to truly close the case, so to speak. And Susan, I'm not sure how to translate, because I'm thinking that the way it's written isn't what you wanted to say. But breathing through, for sure, is going to support us in moving to the next phase. I like that thought. I like the idea of quantum healing, that we actually, when we're fully healed, we're kind of moved out of this frequency to the next quantum level, to the next quantum frequency. If how molecules and electrons in this whole quantum thing work, is that there are different orbitals, and so the electron will exist in a certain orbital, and it builds energy, and it builds energy, and it builds energy, and it doesn't linearly move into another place. It all of a sudden builds enough energy that pop, it goes into the next orbital. And I think that's kind of how we work too. So Bernadette says, I think she means of being here for a week. Oh, good. Okay, for a week if I'm lucky. Great, Susan. Quantum, and then Susan says, quantum healing. Yes. Bernadette, thank you for translating. And yes, we are energetic beings, and our consciousness, I think we do have these quantum leaps of consciousness. I'm hoping that that's the case, because I believe that there's more and more consciousness on the planet, and more awareness. And I'm hoping that all of that is building energy, so that at some point, pop, we'll be in another phase of awareness, kind of like the 100th monkey idea, right? That we get to collectively transform as a result of this phase shift. Anyway, all about going deeper. That's what today's topic was. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. It's such a delight. And also, I appreciate being able to have these conversations, to talk about something, hopefully to be talking about stuff that matters, right? Like, I think these things make a difference. And I like to consider these things because I think that they help to expand my awareness and understanding. And I'm hoping that's the case with you guys as well. Susan says, sweet relief of being in alignment, sometimes for a week. Now I get it, is amazing. Thank you, Susan. And Bernadette says, have a blessed day, everyone. Those are my wishes for you as well. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And Dennis says, thank you for letting us in. That's very kind. Thank you. Please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN, One with the Earth, EWN, Enlightened Living. And until next time, so much love to you and appreciation for you.